It's been about 1,630 days since Britain voted to leave the European Union. Yet with just about 3 weeks until the divorce is complete, as the transition period ends this year, the two sides still haven't managed to agree on new terms of trade, as they both hold firm on red lines including fishing, business rules and how the deal would be governed. EU negotiator Barnier said on Tuesday that no deal is more likely than getting a trade pact by December 31st. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson himself said that a deal would be very difficult to reach, but the power of sweet reason might just push it through. He's met with European Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen on Wednesday to see if it was possible to break this deadlock, but that ended without an agreement, as we just heard moments ago. So is there a way forward from this? We discussed the latest today with Mark Shanahan, Associate Professor and Head of Department for Politics and International Relations at the University of Reading. It's wonderful to have you back. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
We also welcome back Ramon Pacheco-Pardo, Associate Professor of International Relations at King's College London and Korea Foundation VUB Korea Chair at the Institute for European Studies at Brussels Free University. It's great to have you back on the show as well. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, let's start with you, Dr. Shanahan. With the technical negotiations having hit a wall time and time again, Boris Johnson had dinner on Wednesday evening with the European Commissioner to see if there's a political will to really get through this. But we just heard that dinner, it was a no-deal dinner. So does that mean that the Brexit trade deal is effectively dead?
Not quite yet. The talks are probably pretty much on life support, but von der Leyen and Johnson have both agreed that their negotiating teams will get together for another 4 days. They've now set a further deadline. The deadlines have been the most elastic thing about this process, but they've now said that talks can continue up until Sunday. Now, there must be something to talk about. You wouldn't get to this stage and continue the talks if the gaps, which they say are still very big, were so big that they couldn't be brought together. So there still must be some hope. But you've got a clash of ideologies here between a fairly nationalist view from the UK, which wants to go it alone as an independent trading nation, and the European Union, who are really fighting hard to ensure that the single market is not breached in any way. 27 countries in the biggest single trading bloc in the world. They don't want to lose any advantage that brings, or membership of that brings, to a country that's chosen to break away.
And now, Dr. Pacheco-Pardo, the EU has been pushing for Britain to follow the EU social, environmental and health standards, which of course Britain says is really unfair because third countries that have trade ties with the EU, like Canada, they don't strictly have to follow those rules. And of course there have been differences over fishing. The EU wants to keep its current level of access to British waters, while the UK would like to have yearly negotiations and expand exports for British fishermen. And lastly, the differences over the rules on governing the deal, they're also very hard to narrow. So these red lines, they show the friction between respecting British sovereignty and single market integrity, as Dr. Shanahan just pointed out. But where are some potential areas of compromise that you think each side might possibly be able to make?
I think the big discussion right now is how to preserve alignment between the European Union and the UK in the future, because the starting point, the UK obviously was part of the European Union, so the starting point is the same when it comes to standards. Now the European Union insists that the UK is a special case, because obviously it is much closer, much more integrated within the broader European economy than Canada or than any country in Asia that has an FTA with the European Union. Therefore, the rules are different. And I think the European Union also believes that probably the UK won't deviate substantially when it comes to standards in the future, but you never know. UK voters might decide to vote for a government that actually wants to have, for example, an economy that is closer to the American model, where it has far less regulations that we have here in Europe. And obviously that would be detrimental in terms of competition for the European single market. So I think that this is the main sticking point. If you look at fishing, we are talking about quotas. it can probably be agreed. And when it comes to other matters, for example, in terms of tariffs, the absence of quotas, if a trade agreement is actually reached, there is really no disagreement between the European and the UK. They have already reached a deal on that. So we're really talking about the future of the relationship and how to govern this future of the relationship in terms of standards between the European Union and the UK. And this is what we're going to be discussing the next 4 days until Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. Shanahan, there was quite a breakthrough on another deal on the deadlock over Northern Ireland. Cabinet Office Minister Michael Gove and his counterpart on the UK-EU Joint Committee reached an agreement on the border checks and the trading rules for Northern Ireland. How significant is this understanding that they reached, and will it help improve the mood enough to secure a trade deal, or will it, as some people argue, rather make a no-deal scenario more likely, as this Northern Ireland, this very contentious issue has been resolved now?
I think you can almost take it separately from the rest of the European trade deal, but it is very much about a future trade deal. And in the case of the UK, it's about the future trade deal with the United States. With Joe Biden coming into office on January the 20th, Britain will be very, very keen to make a significant trade deal with the new US administration. It may not be the highest priority for Biden's team, but what they have said is that they were not interested whatsoever in making a trade deal while there was any threat to peace in Northern Ireland, while the Belfast Agreement, Good Friday Agreement came under threat. Now, with what the negotiators have managed to do, it means that the clauses that were in the internal markets deal bill that's going through UK Parliament at the moment, any clauses that threatened peace in Northern Ireland are now being removed. That will play well in America, and it could help any future deal that will happen there. And that is really a necessity for the current Conservative administration in the United Kingdom, if they really want to maintain their place at the head of government beyond the next couple of years and through the next election period.
Right, so this was really seen as sort of an olive branch coming from the UK. And Dr. Pacheco-Bardo, there have been questions as to what Joe Biden's election would mean for the Brexit debate. And he isn't in office yet, of course, but is his stance on Brexit something that both UK and EU negotiators are now factoring in?
I think so. I think it is no secret that President Trump, was supportive of Brexit, and he had promised a trade deal to the UK. So if he had been re-elected, the Boris Johnson government here in the UK obviously would have the opportunity to play the EU against the United States. This is not possible anymore, as was just explained by my colleague. So I think that the UK has to consider the very real possibility that a trade deal with the United States will take years. It's not only the Biden administration, but also Congress that made clear that peace in Northern Ireland had to be preserved. And I think on the European side also there was a sigh of relief when Joe Biden was elected, among other things, because they do know, the European officials, they do know that the Biden administration will take a tougher stance vis-a-vis Brexit. He was opposed to it, plus the issue that we just mentioned about Northern Ireland. So I think both sides really have to consider this as part of the negotiation process and are doing so. And you see, in my view, how the UK is quite keen right now in getting some sort of trade agreement with the European Union, has made a clear concession on the Northern Ireland issue, and we see how the stance on fishing rights, for example, on the UK side, it has made clear that a deal can be reached on this matter. So this potentially, or I think, has been at least partially informed by Joe Biden's election in the United States.
And Dr. Shanahan, if the UK gets to the end of the year without a trade deal with the EU, then what happens after that? Are they going to keep trying, or will the UK prioritise a possible US free trade agreement? I mean, and also, what are some potential areas of compromise that you think each side might possibly be able to make on the trade deal?
I think And it's looking quite likely if the UK gets to the end of the year without a deal with the EU, it's going to be messy. But it can't stop. If there is not an agreement on the day that Britain officially exits transition and is completely out of the EU, then more trade discussions have to start. But it will be industry by industry. It will be service by service. It's not going to be quick. It could be messy in terms of travel, in terms of security, in terms of data sharing, in terms of even if us Brits want to use our phones in Europe, everything will be rather more expensive. And that's not going to play well for the British government. So there has to be further conversations going on. It may not be under the auspices of a Brexit deal anymore, but there will be trade deals that have to happen. There will be agreements across industries such as aviation that absolutely have to happen for the smooth running both of the UK economy, but for the European economy as well. We, in the UK, we export 51% of our goods to the European Union. There's a slight trade deficit in that they export slightly different amounts to the UK, but we are huge trading partners for each other. While Britain may make some big noises about huge trade deals elsewhere, and the obvious one will be the United States, the European Union remains our closest and most important trading partner. Many of our industries, most of our industries are integrated across Europe. Our supply chains work across Europe. They have to continue. So deals will be done, but probably slightly more messily than anyone anticipated after the referendum in 2016, when this was going to be the easiest deal in history. It hasn't turned out that way.
So we won't be expecting a mega deal just to sort out everything, but we'll see little messy deals, as you just suggested. And well, in the course of really having these negotiations, Dr. Pacheco-Pardo, do you think the two sides were perhaps too confident when they came into the negotiation room? Where do you think the two sides might have made miscalculations in the negotiations when on the Brexit trade deal?
Well, in my view, being often in Brussels, I think the EU never thought this would be easy, to be honest. The EU has experience of negotiating, for example, with the United States and not reaching an agreement, years of negotiations with countries such as Japan, and a deal only being reached at the last minute, failed negotiations with ASEAN. So the UK is a far more important trading partner for the European Union than these countries, with the partial exception of the United States. And it has this experience of the difficulty in reaching a deal. So everything I always heard from in Brussels, from the European Parliament, the Commission, the different institutions was, this is going to be much more difficult than we think it is. And this is why the European Union would have preferred to wait a bit longer for Article 52 to be triggered, and therefore there would have been a longer period of discussion between the UK and the European Union. As my colleague said, I think during the referendum that we had, the Brexit referendum that we had during the campaign, there was this talk from the Brexit camp that this would be the easiest trade deal in the world, because the starting point was the UK is part of the European Union, so it shouldn't be too difficult. But it has to be said, many experts already back then were saying this is not going to be an easy trade agreement to negotiate, because the European wants to protect the integrity of the internal market, and that's the number one priority, even above having an agreement with the UK. And I think these experts turned out to be right, and it has been a very difficult negotiation process that still hasn't finished.
Right, and well, this question goes to both of you really, but has this been somewhat a rather emotional than economic argument coming from both sides? I mean, and obviously there is a big lack of trust between the two sides, and how important is it to restore that as they move forward into the post-pandemic world, especially? Why don't we start with you, Dr. Shanahan?
If you think about the EU as a project, going right back to the end of the Second World War, this was going to be an alliance across Europe that started as an economic alliance that was about preserving peace. It was always somewhat different for the United Kingdom in that the UK were the victors, whereas most of the original members came out of World War II as the vanquished. So Britain always felt slightly different and never operated in quite the same way. When we had the referendum in 2016, that was very much based on emotion rather than rational thought. Every other country in the world virtually has been working towards agreements and being part of a group. For some reason, the United Kingdom, for some form of exceptionalism, decided we wanted to be different. Maybe it's nostalgic nationalism, whatever it may be. But it's this idea of putting the great back into Great Britain. Don't forget Northern Ireland. We cannot afford to be one small nation, relatively insignificant in global relations terms, sitting alongside 27 nations that remain closely bound together. Whatever happens post-Brexit, the United Kingdom has to work with Europe. We have to be good neighbours. In the midst of this pandemic, never more so. We have to treat this as a global issue and work together. And that's why having good neighbours between the UK and the European Union is absolutely vital. Nobody in the UK, or very few people in the UK, dislike Europe and hate. They maybe dislike the institutions of the European Union. Once we have got past that, we really do have to re-establish a much stronger relationship than we've had for probably 10, 12, even longer, maybe 20 years.
And your thoughts on this, Dr. Pacheco-Pardo? How should the two sides really restore that trust?
I agree that it will take time, but as is often said in the UK, the UK is leaving the European Union, it's not leaving Europe. Geographically, it is in Europe. So absolutely, we're going to need to have a process whereby the EU and the UK restore the trust that clearly has been lost over the past 4 years. When it comes to security cooperation, not only economics, but security cooperation, diplomatic cooperation, political cooperation, you see how the UK and the European Union have very similar positions on how to deal with global issues, for example, such as climate change. They have very similar views on what are the main threats to the European continent. So the starting point actually on these issues is quite good, because there are these links that have been forged over the decades, but there's also a similar worldview. Now the big difference, obviously, as my colleague was saying, is that the UK or a majority of the population in the UK has decided to go it alone, not together with the European Union. But I think in a few years' time there will be if not a realization, we will go back to a stronger cooperation between the EU and the UK that we have seen over these past 4 years. But I do think that without a trade agreement or a trade deal by the end of this year, this process will actually take longer, because we will have to be negotiating mini deals, as we were discussing before, for a number of years, instead of having a bigger deal that can be a good starting point for future cooperation between the two sides.
Well, I'm afraid this is where we're going to have to leave the discussion today, as we're out of time. But that was Dr. Mark Shanahan at the University of Reading and Dr. Ramon Pacheco-Pardo at King's College London, joining us from Reading and London, both in the UK. Thank you both so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, thank you as always for watching.